Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Chip Fridrich. We will talk Vanderbilt baseball. This episode is sponsored by the Well Coffee House, which is a Nashville area coffee house providing fresh roasted coffee, along with house-made pastries, breakfast, and lunch offerings. There are 5 locations to serve you in the Nashville area. Those are in Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, Bellevue, and the Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We also thank our co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Our news today presented by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If your loved one has been hurt in any type of accident, call Taylor or Russell at 846-6200. That's area code 615. See what your rights are and if they can help. Well, Vanderbilt sitting pretty in its bracket in Omaha. The Commodores beat Mississippi State by a 6-3 score on Wednesday afternoon. The Heroes, Steven Scott launches 2 home runs, including a big 3-run bomb in the middle of the game, and Kumar throws 6 innings, gives up 1 run. Tyler Brown gets 2 1/3 innings to get a big save. The Commodores now await the winner of Thursday's scheduled elimination game between Mississippi State and Louisville. Our guest line, presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduate Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on their sheets for years. They're amazing. I'm not sleeping on them right now on the road trip, and boy, you can tell a difference. I had no idea how much of a difference sheets made until I got Boll & Branch sheets. They are fair trade certified, which means they're made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you won't want to. If you have the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled BOLL. Enter the promo code Vandy. Get $50 off your first set of sheets. Chip Fridrich joins us now. I am in the great state of Nebraska. He is back home in Nashville, so we had different vantage points for today's action, which frankly I wasn't sure this morning I was going to see in person. It has been a whirlwind for me, Chip, since I've been out in Nebraska. I've been in 4 different beds and 4 different nights. Tomorrow night will be 5 for 5. It has been quite a day. I was just glad to be at the ballpark, and I'm just happy that I have an internet connection, which has not been a given all week, and that you're joining me tonight. So thanks for being with me.
First of all, we got to discuss what kind of car you're driving, because we'll get to the game in a second, of course. But I got to hear that you sent out a tweet of the car you drove from Lincoln to Omaha, and I wish everyone that you need to check out Chris's tweet, his Twitter feed, and that was an outstanding vehicle. What was that ride you were in?
Well, let me back up and get there, because here is my day. Okay, as a lot of people know, my wife's family is from out in the Lincoln and Omaha area, so we had made a decision, I don't know, 6 months ago, that we were going to take a trip and we were going to time it during the College World Series. That way I could cover it and she could do things. And so what we did is we drove out here in it's not a minivan, but it's a crossover vehicle. So we drive out here, and I don't just have carte blanche to take that vehicle to Omaha, because she's got people to do and things to see, and we are staying like with a different friend every night. So I'm not going to leave her to, like today she had 3 different places to be. So like that's loading suitcases 3 different times and car seats and all that. So that just is no good. So we reserved a rental car yesterday for me to go to the ballpark, which of course, actually I got out there yesterday with her car, and then the game got canceled, as you know. So had to restart today and do everything from scratch. Well, she needed the car today, so I had to get my own ride. And we have a car rented, and I get to the shop to pick it up, and they're like, "We're so sorry, we don't have a number to contact you. We basically have no rental cars." So I'm like, "Great, I got to be there in 2 hours," and so we're just scrambling at this point. They're like, everybody else in town has the same issue because the rain delay in Omaha screwed everything up. So there's like no cars to rent because everybody was going to turn it in yesterday was still going to games today. So I'm 60 miles out in Lincoln thinking, I'm looking at Lyft and Uber, and it's crazy to get there. It's like $80-$90 one way, plus whatever you would tip. And I'm like, well, that's no good. So I said, Kristen, just drive me to the airport. I'm going to go in and just see if anybody at the counter happens to have a car. So I go to Avis. they're the first one there, and I'm thinking I'm just going to get whatever vehicle they got. Well, they got a pickup truck and a car. I'm like, I'll take the car. I didn't even ask the price. So I'm like, how much is it? They're like $137. I'm going, oh man, but I'm like, I got no option at this point. So, and I've got to get out there early to pick up a credential because the window for picking those up closes too. So I'm just like, I had a headache all day from trying to figure this all out. So, yeah, I'm like, what kind of car is it? Dodge something. I mean, he could have said, Dodge go-kart, and I would not have heard him. So
ugliest car on the lot.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, as long as it's a golf cart and it gets me there, I don't care at this point. So I'm in a daze. I'm like, I cannot believe I just paid $137 for a rental car for one day. But it is what it is. We came out there for this. So I'm just going to bite the bullet. So he says, cars across the street in the garage, blah, blah, blah. So I'm walking down there, and I remember the spot he tells me. And I'm just looking for this little rinky-dink whatever. And I look up, and I'm like, wait, that's my spot. And I looked down at my key fob. I was like, yeah, that says Dodge. I've got a Dodge Challenger, which if you don't know what that is, it is flat out freaking fantastic. I'm looking at that. I'm going, my day just got a whole lot better. And on the way home, we're staying with Kristen's great aunt. So I'm doing this podcast from their basement. And so
that's creepy a little bit.
It is a little bit, but that confirms every suspicion anybody ever had about me, probably. But so I'm driving home, and I'm about 10 miles out from their house, and I'm on this main road. And I look up, and there's these teenagers pulling up next to me in a pickup truck. And they give me the eye, and they start revving the engine and squealing the tires. And I mean, as soon as the light turns green, they take off. And I'm like, dear God, these kids have no clue how out of my element I am. I did not take them on, but I just like, that just tops off the day that I got basically challenged to a drag race on the way home. So
yeah. And speaking of revving engines, the Vandy boys got it going a little bit today, and they managed to get that elusive second win that's all important, and especially, goodness gracious, a huge day for Steven Scott, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, he got the engine revved early. The first one, I wasn't sure if it was going to leave the park. The second one, he just got all of that.
Yeah, he's got that choking up on the bat, a half inch or an inch, which you've noticed all year, and really does a good job of squaring up on balls, especially when pitchers make mistakes. And when you have a game like him, especially batting in the sixth spot, and he gets 4 RBIs, responsible for the 6 runs, it was a huge day for them. Got a little tenuous there late with Raby coming in, but all in all, that is all important, and it's just like the SEC tournament. We're basically playing, as you know, a little mini SEC two mini SEC tournaments, 2 brackets, and getting that second win is always important for your bullpen, and for the as you move forward towards the weekend, hopefully getting that championship series. So, very important win by the Vandy boys, and I know Tim Corbin's got to be relieved that, you look at Mississippi State, Chris, who has had so many come from behind wins, and I'm talking with friends and former players and teammates of mine, and, you're sitting there and you're wondering if Tim's going to bring in Brown and is he going to save him? And you think, this 6-0 lead, we can kind of piece together and save Brown for Friday. And I think, the message got pretty, when Raby started giving up some hits and they were squaring up on him, you knew that he was going to have to go to him because he wasn't going to fool around and get the victory, because you lose that game in some more miraculous fashion. Mississippi State comes back and wins, then you worry about the psyche of the team going forward. And it was getting that important win as they head into Friday and getting the day off tomorrow.
Let's start with the Raby thing. That was like the one. Well, the 2 blights on the day were just missed scoring opportunities, which they also did in the Louisville game. And you just are thinking, man, that's the kind of game, if you lose, you're just killing yourself for that. But the Raby thing, And I guess I don't really have not figured out, and I didn't get a chance to ask him. I don't know what Tim was thinking with that on a number of levels. And no offense to Patrick Raby, he's had a great career, but they've got several guys pitching better right now. And we're all sitting in the press box. Adam Sparks and I are talking with another writer. We're like, okay, what are they doing? Because this game's not won yet. If they go to an elimination game and need to do that, you're going to need Raby probably to start game 4, unless it's maybe Zach King, unless you go back to Phelps. We just could not figure out why they used him in that spot for a number of reasons, but the least of which was that, because we're like, that may be an arm that you want to start 2 or 3 days from now. Did that make any sense to you?
No, it was unusual. I'll admit that. And trying to think about what he and Brownie were thinking about. I mean, you would maybe think that he was going to go Raby and then maybe Eater or Smith and then piece it together and try to finish it out with those two without trying to go to Brown. Because on the back of my head, in my mind, I was thinking, well, if they can get Tyler, because he pitched, 6 outs against Louisville, 7 outs, 2 days prior, or 48 hours prior, roughly 48 hours, that maybe give him an extra day's rest. But he looked sharp when he came in. But, I was thinking it was just going to be a situation they'd go Raby, 1 inning, piece it together, maybe Eater, Smith, that type of deal. And then when the tide changed, I think what their psyche of thinking what they're going to do to finish up changed as well. But, having not had Raby pitch in relief that I'm aware of, thinking back, I don't think he has, because he's always had that starting spot. It was a little bit of I'm not saying it was a gamble. Perhaps they were just trying to piece it together there, and that was the initial thought of what they were trying to do. But it was a little, when I saw him warming up in the pen on television, I thought about it for a minute, and I said, well, maybe they're up 6-0, get a strike thrower in there, get an inning out of him, get him some work in case he did have to go in the championship series. So I'm not casting any blame or doubt. They had their reasons. They had, when you get into this tournament, and we've talked about this before, you get your guys you can trust, and you wonder if they've been, Tim's a guy of habit. Therefore, Scott Brown's going to be a creature of habit, and you wonder why, that's not what they've done all year. That's it. And so that's the one thing you can question. I wish you knew the answer, or you could have asked, or if Tim was asked in the press conference, their thought process of why they did it. But I'm not saying they got away with it. They still won by 3 runs. It did get a little hairy there late, just with the way that Raby was hit. And people were, Mississippi State was squaring up on the baseball when he was in there for those frames. So, yeah, I agree. It was a little unusual that they hadn't done it all year, and being those two guys being creatures of habit, that was the question that I had as far as why they pitched him. But they got through it, and they move on.
Who did they have up in the pen? They had a couple of right-handers. I think Hickman was up at one point. I was figuring he was probably just getting work for, getting loose, getting a bullpen day. I know they had Brown up. Did they have Smith up at one point? Because I know they had Eater throwing briefly. I'm like, Eater and Smith have been the guys that they've used in that spot, and those two have been lights out lately. To me, that was another layer of decision. Okay, so Smith was never up. Yeah, I didn't get that either. I think it was
Eater. It was Eater. I think it was Eater, and initially it was just Raby by himself, and then Eater joined him. And the two of them were throwing, and then Eater sat down, and it was just Raby. So I did not see Smith, or at least it didn't appear that he was up when they showed the bullpen.
Yeah, I never was sure that I saw him. It's just weird because as big as Tim is on rolls, those have been the roles that those kids have pitched in, and they just went away from it more or less. I mean, usually you have Eater or Smith coming on, say, 5th, 6th, and then they, like, when they need a lefty arm, they go Fisher, and then they go Brown, but that wasn't what they did at all.
Yeah, and you talk about roles, too. I made a comment to one of my former teammates that, I can't think of in the last, 5 or 6, 7 games, and perhaps more than that. I mean, when's the last time a pinch hitter has come in to this lineup? I mean, it has been strictly those same 9 guys. I mean, thinking back, We maybe had a pinch runner at one point, but I mean, the lineup has been the lineup. You don't even have to print it out anymore. It can be, it's just, he turns it over. So those roles, as far as doing the same thing that that staff has been doing, as far as out on the field and the batting order, has been the same. And that was just a little unusual today that they made that little twist in the bullpen.
Yeah, and I guess his justification would be, well, we kicked Pat out of his spot, so we need to put him in a spot where he can pitch. But anyway, I think we've hit that one to death. To your question, I think the last time they pinch hit anybody was the Duke blowout game in Game 1 of the Super Regional when they were hopelessly down and he cleared the bench in the ninth inning.
True. Yeah, that would. But as far as being in a game that was tight, that is a true statement of that game. But as far as being a game that was tight, that meant something, that was, fifth, sixth, seventh inning, it's been a long time since that's happened.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Well, let's talk Kumar Rocker. It was an odd outing for him in a way because he didn't pitch at the pace he has, and he made some comments. I asked him in the postgame, and I don't have it in front of me. I hadn't seen the transcription of it yet. I haven't gone back and listened, but from memory, basically what he said was, I think he was kind of getting used to pitching on that stage in the first inning and just needed to slow down and concentrate and make sure he was focused on the hitters. It was just an unusual approach. Of course, State got guys on early in innings a few times, which that's going to bring anything to a screeching halt because you got to check the runner. But it was just an unusual outing for him. It wasn't nearly as dominant as the last one was. It was more of the pitch-to-contact Kumar Rocker that we saw earlier in the year, and I think that might have been the slowest pace he's thrown out all season.
Yeah, I mean, 95 pitches, 63 strikes. Of those 95, he gave up, 5 hits, scattered 5 hits over 6 innings, still struck out 6. His pace wasn't the same, and, you wonder if there was any fatigue involved from what happened a week ago. I mean, the 130 pitches, and, he's still a young kid, and I'm sure he was fine with that, but it is a big stage. I mean, you're talking about, 15,000 people watching you in the stage that he's on, facing a really good Mississippi State team. I think Mississippi State attacked early in the count, and the ESPN crew made a point of that, which was a good observation by Peterson and Perez, that they were attacking fastball early and not waiting on that slider. The slider was good. It still made a lot of the Mississippi State hitters, striking out 6, and when they struck out, they were not as silly as he made the Duke hitters look, but they still, when he was on, that bite was there on the slider. Probably not as dominant with that pitch. And you even mentioned, if you harken back to the no-hitter, that there were the comments that what Philip Clark made, that he's got this thing going, it's on. But I still think it was as dominant, maybe not as sharp as it had been. Just another great outing by Rocker, though. When you look at it, look what you're comparing it to, a 19 strikeout no hitter, and might be spoiled a little bit in some people's minds. But I think he still, I thought Kyle Peterson had a very good comment about what needs to be worked on, and Carl Ravitch asked him point blank, what does a Kumar Rocker need to do for next year? And I do think, he probably does have a change up. It still needs to get better. If that guy gets a change up that's anywhere close to a slider, you'll see a lot of, I'm not saying no hitters, but some dominant major strikeout performances down the future for Kumar Rocker. So it's a pitch that he needs to develop, and you saw as the game went on, which he usually does, his pace quickened. He wants to get the ball back from the infielders. Even when he gave up, in the situation where he gave up the run he gave in the frame in the 6th, his last inning, he wanted the ball back from Austin Martin. Let's go. I'm getting back on the hill. I'm ready to finish this inning off, and he did. So I thought, the pace was a little bit slower, but on that stage, I thought he did really, really well, and I know staff has got to be proud of his effort, and hopefully, if this team can do what they're capable of doing and finishing this thing off this weekend, either Friday or Saturday, that he'll be ready for the championship series. And we can discuss that in a little bit, I'm sure. But that's going to be, the rain did not help us last night. Having the rain out, when you're the last set of teams to play in this tournament, and then you get the rain delay, you're already behind the 8 ball as far as time when you compare it to when you're looking forward to the championship series that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. And when you get a rain delay, it hurts you even more because it pushes things back and it messes up your rotation a bit as far as if in a perfect world of going back with 1, 2, 3. And that's going to be hard to piece together unless you get some guys on short rest. And that's a decision. You're playing for a national title, hopefully, and these guys can get it out. But they also are talking about kids who have potential to make millions of dollars, and they're their babysitter for 2-3 years, and their counselor, and taking care of their arms. If that's going to be a decision they're going to have to do next week, hopefully that'll be a problem they'll have to confront.
Well, on the change-up thing with Kumar Rocker, I was talking to Aaron Fitt today. He and I were the only two media guys who saw that legendary outing against Oklahoma State in the fall. And I said, Aaron, didn't he throw the changeup a little bit in the outing? He said, yeah, I think he threw it once. He said, I think he struck a guy out on it too, but we both just kind of agreed. Right now, what he's got is working. He doesn't really need that other pitch. Now, next year, like you said, will be interesting. The rain, I don't know. I look at that a little differently. I thought that them winning the game today, more or less, I don't know. I want to say it sort of, since they won, I don't know that it affects much. I think that the teams that it hurts more are Louisville and Mississippi State because they got that, and now they're going through the losers bracket. I don't know. Maybe you think it does hurt Vanderbilt too, but I was kind of thinking today when I was leaving the park, getting that one in and getting the win today, in my mind, set it close to even again.
Yeah, and we talked a couple weeks ago when the SEC tournament happened. You still have that situation where, this team faced it in 2014 when they lost to Texas. They were sitting in the winner's bracket, and they lost to Texas in the first elimination game. They had to play the if necessary game, the next game, which the Commodores won, to propel them to the 3-game series against Virginia. But you've got a little bit of that momentum swing where your win, you've got your 2 wins, you're sitting there and you're practicing and hanging out and going to a movie or going to the zoo, whatever you're going to do in Omaha, and you are facing a team that's going to have, in their mind, a little bit of momentum, and perhaps they're going to go for broke because they're doing all they can. They know that they've got to get a win. So you wonder, you're going to get, at some point, you're going to get their ace, whether it be Louisville, in the situation with Louisville, you harken back to, okay, are you going to see, who they pitched in game 1 and that type of deal, or are you going to see Mississippi State try to do all they can? You're going to see some good pitching. It's not like teams are going to sit back and say, well, we're going to have to conserve our pitching. When you're in their position, they're going to go for broke, and they're not really as worried, if this makes sense, about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. You can sit there and worry a little bit about it if you're Vanderbilt, but I know that Tim Corbin's going to do all he can. And, then you start forward thinking, which is dangerous. We can do this as observers and people who follow, like, okay, well, what happens if we get knocked off on Friday? Then who do you pitch in the Saturday, if necessary, game? You can do those what ifs, but it's just a momentum thing it's the good news, you're getting the rest. And with the bad news, if it is bad news, the other team's coming in with momentum, and they're going to throw the kitchen sink at you to try to get you into that crucial, if necessary, game. So a lot of baseball to be played still in this tournament, and I'd rather take the rest and have my pitching staff fresh than the alternative.
Let's go back to the bracket for a minute and look at it from the perspective of some other teams. I think the State-Louisville game will be very interesting because, like you said, it's elimination game, and you see stuff like tomorrow's starter being used today. I think what you want in that game is, like a 21-inning game where everybody uses the whole staff, and Ethan Small throws 8 innings in relief or something like that. That will be interesting. I think that here's the way I see it, Chip. I think that barring something like that happening, whoever advances, whether it is Louisville, I would expect to see Reed Detmers. If it's State, I would think you would see Ethan Small again. But I think, and that's going to be tough. That might be a game that Vanderbilt loses, but where I think that gets tough for those teams, you've got to turn around and beat Vanderbilt the next day. And at that point, God only knows what you have left. I wouldn't think they could throw Peyton Plumlee again if you're State. I don't know that any team could throw another starter again unless I haven't checked Louisville's to see if they had a guy that just went 30 or 40 pitches or something like that. But point is, I think that the Friday game could be tough unless something crazy happens on Thursday, because you'll probably see an ace again. But then I think if that Saturday game gets interesting, because I think that's where the pitching probably tilts back in Vandy's favor, and the Commodores, of course, I would just presume would probably roll over to Fellows again.
Yeah, that's the question there. You'd almost, thinking of how the way Tim and Brownie think and what they've done, I think you would have to go Fellows on Saturday, because your philosophy is, you can't hold back. There is no Monday if you don't win Saturday, and you use kind of theory of you worry about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday when it happens. So I think that's what you would see. So, but I do harken back to those and remember that Texas series. That was a very emotional roller coaster when you had a team that in the Commodores and went 2-0, and then Texas shut them down on that Friday night, I think it was, and then had the wild game on Saturday, advanced them to the championship series. So still a lot of baseball. I know a lot of people making plans to go to Omaha and what they're going to do and getting rooms and flights and everything. And that's all fine and dandy, but there's still some crazy stuff that we've seen happen in this tournament. I think Vanderbilt probably would rather play Louisville if they had their choice, just for the fact that I think they've handled them and Louisville's pitching staff, through the two outings that they've had. I think Mississippi State would just be, they're a team that plays a lot on emotion, and they can square up on balls and have big innings, and the familiarity that you have with the team in the conference, even though we did not play Mississippi State. We've only played them twice this year, once in the tournament and once here. There's just that familiarity as far as, scouting reports and how these teams know about each other through the league. So, I think you would see, I agree with you. I think if it's Mississippi State, I think you're going to see Small, and I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Detmers from Louisville either. This is the best. When tonight's over, you're going to have the best, 4 teams left playing for a national title. It's not supposed to be easy, and I don't think these guys think it's going to be easy. And it's a time where you're going to have to, button up here and still play ball, because there's still a lot of baseball in front of them. Not to get too far ahead. You just got to play the tournament, as Tim always says. You've heard him quoted. You got to play the tournament. You got to, don't look too far up the bracket, and don't look at what ifs and scenarios, because if you do that, you lose focus of, and it's cliche, one game at a time. You just play the tournament, and you just play little mini one-game tournaments, and then tell them, as Tim, I heard him say in a press conference one time, we just play games, and they tell us when to show up, and then we show up and play the next one.
Well, here's another thing they've got going for them. If they've not had the toughest 2-game draw so far, I don't know who has.
Oh yeah, and it could have gotten easy on the side. I mean, if Auburn does what they're supposed to do, what they could have done in that first game, that could have really worked in Vanderbilt's favor. But Mississippi State clearly was the better team. I felt like in that game that Auburn was just trying to sprint in quicksand. I mean, they just could not get it done, and you were just waiting for Mississippi State to come back. But yeah, it's a tough draw. That's the way this thing is. And, I've had people ask me, well, how did they do that? Well, why did Vanderbilt have to play the bracket? Well, I mean, that of course was determined, for people don't know. It was determined, when the tournament started, and it's bracketed out that way. And no one knew that the other side was going to look like that. And that's the way you got to play the tournament out. But it's a tough draw this side. And you still got that Michigan on the other side. And wouldn't that be a special 3-game series with Michigan and Vanderbilt, with Bakich, his ties to Vanderbilt, and Tim, and goodness, that would be, I bet a lot of people would come from Big Ten country to watch that series, and Michigan, I'm sure, would bring a bunch of people. So that, again, getting ahead of ourselves, but that would be an interesting 3-game series with Bakich and Corbin going at it.
Yeah, I'm rooting for Michigan to get there because I really liked Eric, got to know him a little bit from his time here. And plus, the story is great. I think it would be great for college baseball to have somebody emerge out of the Big Ten, especially in that area, because Michigan has had a historically good program. I don't know what kind of following they really have, but I think it'd be good for the game, which you and I both love. But from a standpoint of just baseball, if you're Vanderbilt, and let's say you get through that, I've been thinking all along that's kind of the team that you hope we get through because of the four teams on that side. I think they were widely perceived to be the quote unquote worst. Not that they're a bad team, but probably if you could pick your draw, that's who you'd like. But boy, watching them pitch, and I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago. I looked at all the rotations in the super regionals. Michigan starting three had thrown like 45 or 50 more innings, more than anybody else's of the 16 teams in the supers. I kind of sat up and took notice at that. It's like, this is sort of a team to watch. Now, as I watch them play and how they're winning games and the way they are sort of made for that ballpark, is Michigan getting them, is that sort of a be careful what you wish for scenario now?
Well, they've got I would say their top three, it's quite apparent that there's a gap there. And they had the unbelievable fortune of having a pitcher throw 98 innings, complete game last night. Anytime you do that, we've seen what happens in tournaments. We've seen that happen in super regionals and SEC tournaments in Vanderbilt's favor. And when you do that and you keep your bullpen fresh, it just gives you all that more opportunity down the road. But yeah, their top three guys have thrown a heck of a lot more than their 4 through 8 guys. So, and this stage of the tournament, you're going to see, and I said this after the game today, at some point, Vanderbilt's 5 through 8 guys are going to have to pitch. I mean, you're going to have Smith. You're going to have Eder. You're going to have an A.J. Franklin probably. You're going to have, all those guys, Zach King, at somewhere it is not going to, the baseball gods are not going to allow a Vanderbilt. It just doesn't happen to just go 1, 2, 3 and have a couple days off and go to the movie and hang out in Omaha and then go 1, 2, 3 in the championship series. Weather's going to come into play. Somebody's going to get hit up. There's going to be some misfortune happen somewhere where you don't think for a minute that those guys, and if I'm Tim Corbin and I'm Scott Brown and I'm telling them and reminding them someone is going to have to play a key role. And I'm talking about the pitchers here. If I'm talking to the pitchers exclusively, one of you guys is going to have to step up and it's going to be called upon in a huge role. So when it's your turn, you need to make sure you're mentally ready, because it is going to be, especially with the way it is now, with pitchers having certain number of days rest and being ready, they're going to have some guys. So don't think that those guys aren't going to get a chance. And when it's their turn, they're going to have to have the confidence and the slow heartbeat to get out there and not fold on the big stage and make sure that they're ready for their turn.
Well, as we were doing this, Texas Tech has just eliminated Florida State, so the Mike Martin farewell tour has made its last wave goodbye. Now, that'll be interesting because Tech has got to beat Michigan, of course, twice. Michigan, of course, seems to have the deeper pitching. That's really funny because Tech swept Michigan in a 3-game series earlier in the year. So I think if you're Vanderbilt or whoever comes out, you're just really what you're hoping is that Michigan doesn't just take it 3-0 and have a chance to rest and reset the rotation. I think if you're the team coming out of Vanderbilt's side of the bracket, you're just going, whatever happens, we want to see those teams play a couple of games.
Yeah, it's a really weird format, and it's identical to the SEC tournament format, except for the final game where you have a 3-game series instead of just the one championship game, because you have 8 teams and you have this other bracket. You see the guys at the banquet or at the ceremony, the opening ceremony, but they're just literally in a separate tournament. Don't have anything to do with any of those guys as far as playing them. And I'm sure there's scouting involved, of course, for potential opponents. So, but I guarantee you there's familiarity there, and the Vanderbilt coaches know what they're, that probably secretly Corbin would probably say he's rooting for Bakich, but you don't want those guys to be lined up with as good as those guys have been pitching on the Wolverine side. If they sit there and eliminate Texas Tech in the first game,
and not play the if necessary game and don't go too deep in the bullpen, then they're going to be completely lined up to gun for with their starting lineup, with their starting pitching rotation going 1, 2, 3 starting Monday night.
Let's go to the mailbag, which is sponsored by my friend and insurance agent, Josh Minton. He's an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. If you're looking for a one-stop shop for your insurance needs, Josh has you covered. Call him at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ or on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it here on the program. Some of these questions were asked a few days ago, so they're a little bit out of date, but I'm going to sort through these anyway, and because some of these are still relevant for sure. Let's see. This one sort of got answered today. VU Matt 23 says, will we get to see Ethan Smith in Omaha, or will Tim stick with more experienced guys like King, Fisher, Brown, and Eater?
Well, of course, you saw in game one against Louisville that, King came in, but King has that, faced one batter, walked him, faced two batters and had one walk. And it was, I think Tim's hook is a little quicker in this tournament, rightfully so. I think you saw that today by Mississippi State, too, as far as when a pitcher, it's obvious that they don't have it. But I think I answered that question with my comment a minute ago. Yes, I do think you're going to see those guys called upon at some point, and it's going to be an important role. So just because you haven't seen them yet, you haven't seen the Eaters and the Smiths at all in this tournament, I think their time is coming. So, yes, I think that you will see those guys today. I think it was just something they felt with Raby, and they went with it. And I'm not saying, again, it backfired. It just a little bump in the road there, and Raby, Raby himself could be called upon in a starting role if it gets, messed up as far as what your perfect world would be for a rotation. Don't think for a minute that they wouldn't throw a guy out there who's had more wins than anybody in this program's history and give him the ball in a starting role. It could be that Raby's, used to be starter, and it was just a different role for him today and didn't feel comfortable for whatever reason. But don't think for a minute that Raby is done either.
This next one from Mr. Vandy, he says, does Austin Martin's power surge the last couple of games bode well for him going into next season?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Austin Martin, I've been saying this for weeks. I mean, the guy was off the charts, batting close to 440, 438. I think he got up to 440 maybe, and just came back to normalcy in what he did, went through a little slump. But, yeah, I think that it bodes well for that kid. I think he's on the premier stage. He's I don't know, and I had this conversation with some people this past week who'd be in the know a lot about baseball. I'm not real sure third base is his spot. Don't know if he eventually will transition back to the outfield. I know he gave second base a go. The coaching staff gave him a go and then missed a series and then found himself without a position. They moved him to third. But I think that he's just a natural hitter, natural instincts. It was funny to hear Corbin in a blurb today talking about whether he's a power hitter or not. I think those are just, he just really does hit the ball on the screws, and when he hits it and has a presence at the plate that he doesn't chase a lot of bad pitches and doesn't miss much. So this is I'm not saying it's a coming out party. I'm sure not too many people knew about Austin Martin on the national stage, but he looks the part in the first two games. He's got a little bit of swagger about him, and he's definitely increased his image as far as next year will be a very high draft.
This one from Dusty Orleans. Does Austin Martin's power surge partially negate the benefit of batting all day in the two-hole? It seems like JJ is getting pitched around more lately without having Martin on base.
Well, it was good to see JJ Bleday get those hits today. He squared up on that ball and hit it in the gap, so it was good to see him. JJ's been the regional and the super regional. We had the shifts going on, and I think he was squeezing the bat a little bit too tight. But I think today he came out But whatever I say is not going to matter, and that is really the answer because they're not changing the lineup. They're not going to change the order. So we can sit here and talk about all you want to, but you can pencil in, unless something dramatic happens, they're not going to change the order. They've gone through that order for a month and a half, and it isn't going to change. So, but it is. I think it's a shame they couldn't push across in the first inning today, because that was a situation with a couple runners on that could have gotten a quick lead for Rocker. But, JJ went through 4 today with an RBI. He also had a walk. Thought he played well, except for that bonehead. And it's hard for me to say. I mean, people make mistakes, but really questionable base running by JJ Bleday late in that ball game that I'm not sure if he lost where the ball was when he took off from second base on the pretty easy to read liner to left. But, hey, when that's one of the few things JJ Bleday I can complain about that he's done probably in the last 4 months.
Yeah, it was an encouraging sign to see that ball hit in the gap today, because that's one of the first balls he's really hit hard in the last couple of weeks. He's been productive, but it's been through walks and singles. The first hit he had today was kind of a fluke that fell between 3 guys. Another one he hit hard, and then he really crushed that one.
Yeah, he hit that ball hard, squared up, and hit in the gap. The first one, he's either hitting moon balls and that ball was a tough play behind in kind of that no man's land behind shortstop and left field, and was lucky to get on there. But of course, nothing came about it. But hopefully, he's ramping up for a big next 4, 5, 6 days in Omaha.
Chip, let's end this thing for tonight. I've got to get some sleep, but tell people about your real estate business and where they can find you.
Sure, Chris, I'll be real quick about this. Frederick and Clark Realty is a real estate company. We've been around for over 60 years. And the process, I'll talk a little bit about the process of going into a relationship with a realtor like one of ours at Frederick and Clark, and the way that works, and what the tools that we bring to the table. And it's not just the real estate services. We can walk you through the mortgage process, which is important, that we recommend people get pre-qualified for a house before they even begin the process, so they know exactly what they can buy in the price range, if they're going to make an offer, how they can stretch themselves, or what they're comfortable with a monthly payment. So getting established with a mortgage lender, we have several that we recommend. Each agent has their favorite, but we have ones that we scrutinize. It's always important to get a referral there. And then, of course, we help with the contract negotiations when a buy or a sale or listing agreement. And then, of course, when a house that goes under contract, using an inspector, and that's always important. Find out that the house is in proper condition, whether it's an engineer or a regular home inspector. We also have referrals for that. So it's not a simple process that some people who've never gone through it before think, well, I'm just going to use a real estate agent. He's going to draw up a contract. We offer services for referrals for insurance, and as I mentioned, for inspections, for mortgage services. All those make a complete package as far as buying and selling a home. So give me a call. If you're one of your listeners are interested in buying or selling their home, I can hook you up with one of our agents. We've got 170 full-time agents that do this for a living, not part-time agents. This is what they do. So they're focused and centered on what's best for their clients and what the market conditions are on a daily basis. So check our website out at frederickandclark.com, 615-327-4800. And Chris, I hope I will see you in a couple of days out there, and we can say hello, and hopefully some good news next time we do this broadcast, whenever that is, that we do it out there, with some good news about heading into a championship series and hopefully bringing some hardware home back to Nashville.
Well, Chip, I can promise you 2 things. When you get to Omaha, I would love to meet up with you, and I hope I can. And I can promise you that when you see me, I will not be in a vehicle nearly as cool as the one I drove today.
I hope you took a photo.
I did. There may be a like a 6 a.m. victory lap tomorrow if I could manage that. Hey, where did Chris go? Oh, you'll hear it if I do. That thing, man, thing
I'm
is
sure. Yeah,
it's got a purr to it.
Yourself. That's right. All right. Well, let's get a couple victories here and bring one home. But good talking to you.
Yeah. He's Chip Fridrich. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening. We are sorry the podcast schedule has been a little erratic lately with the travel and such. We will try to do a couple more of these later in the week. I can't make a promise on when they will be out, but of course, if you subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, many platforms, you get them sent to your device automatically. So be sure to do that so you don't miss an episode. If you would, please give us a rating. That helps us out on iTunes and helps more people find the podcast. Anyway, for Chip Fridrich, I'm Chris Lee. Thanks for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Back with another episode again in the coming days.